The cold bit through Owen O'Malley's leather coat like wolf's teeth as his horse trudged through the deepening snow, each breath from both man and beast forming white clouds that vanished into the gray afternoon sky. He had been riding since dawn, trying to reach Laredo, Texas before the unexpected blizzard that had swept down from the north made the journey impossible. But winter had other plans for December 1881. The snowfall had started as innocent flurries that morning, but had transformed into a relentless curtain of white that obscured everything beyond a few yards. And Owen knew he would need to find shelter soon or risk freezing to death on the open range. His cattle ranch lay another 10 miles south, too far to reach safely in these conditions, so he guided his mare toward a cluster of cottonwoods he remembered from summer drives, hoping their bare branches might offer some protection from the wind. That was when he saw her. At first, Owen thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, that the swirling snow had created an illusion of a human form crumpled in the white field ahead. He blinked hard, squinting through the frozen precipitation, but the shape remained. His heart lurched in his chest as he urged his horse forward, dread building with each step. No one should be out here in this weather, not without a horse, not without proper winter gear, not alone and motionless in a field that stretched for miles without another soul in sight. As he drew closer, Owen could make out details that made his pulse quicken. A woman lay curled on her side in the snow, her dark hair spread around her head like spilled ink on white paper. She wore only a thin cotton dress, torn and mudded, completely inadequate for the brutal cold that had descended on the Texas plains. Her lips had taken on a bluish tinge, and her skin looked pale as the snow surrounding her. Owen dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his boots sinking into the drift as he rushed to kneel beside her. "Madam, can you hear me?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, edged with worry. He pulled off his glove and pressed his fingers against her throat, searching for a pulse. For a terrible moment he felt nothing and his stomach dropped. Then, faint as a whisper, he detected the slow flutter of her heartbeat beneath her cold skin. She was alive, but barely. Owen did not hesitate. He shrugged out of his heavy coat and wrapped it around her small frame, lifting her into his arms as carefully as he could manage. She was light, too light, as though she had not eaten properly in days or perhaps weeks. Up close, he could see bruises on her arms and a cut on her temple that had bled and then frozen. Questions crowded his mind, each one more urgent than the last. Who was she? How had she ended up alone in this desolate place? What had happened to leave her in such desperate condition? But those questions would have to wait. Right now, survival took precedence over curiosity. "You are coming home with me," Owen said firmly, though she could not hear him in her unconscious state. It was not a request or an offer, but a simple statement of fact. He could not leave her here to die, and he would not try to make it all the way to Laredo in this storm with an injured woman who needed immediate warmth and care. His ranch was closer than town, and he knew every inch of this land even in a blizzard. Owen settled the woman across his saddle, keeping one arm wrapped securely around her as he swung up behind her. His mare snorted her displeasure at the extra weight and the worsening weather, but she was a steady mount who had carried him through worse situations. He turned the horse south, trusting his instincts and the mare's sure footing to guide them through the white void that had swallowed the landscape. The ride took nearly 2 hours, though it felt like an eternity. Owen kept talking to the unconscious woman, partly to keep himself alert and partly in the hope that his voice might somehow reach her through whatever darkness held her. He told her about his ranch, about the warm fire waiting there, about his housekeeper Rosa who would know how to tend her injuries. He told her she was safe now, that he would not let anything happen to her, making promises to a stranger that he fully intended to keep. By the time the familiar outline of his ranch house emerged from the snow like a ship appearing through fog, Owen's entire body ached from the cold and tension. He had built the house himself 5 years ago when he was 23, using timber from the hills and stone from the creek bed, constructing something solid and lasting that would withstand the harsh Texas weather. Now he thanked God for those sturdy walls and the smoke he could see rising from the chimney, proof that Rosa had kept the fires burning. "Rosa!" Owen shouted as he dismounted awkwardly, still holding the woman against his chest. "Rosa, I need help." The door flew open, and Rosa Martinez appeared, her round face creased with concern. She was a woman in her 50s who had worked for Owen since he bought the ranch, serving as housekeeper, cook, and sometimes the voice of reason when his stubborn nature got the better of him. She took one look at the unconscious woman in his arms and immediately stepped aside, gesturing him toward the bedroom. "Bring her to the spare room," Rosa commanded, her Mexican accent thickening with urgency. "I will get blankets and hot water. What happened?" "Found her in the north field, just lying in the snow," Owen explained as he carried his burden down the hallway. "No coat, no horse, barely breathing. She has been hurt, Rosa. There are bruises and a head wound." Rosa crossed herself quickly. Who would leave a woman to die in such weather? "I do not know, but I intend to find out." Owen laid the woman carefully on the bed in the spare room, which Rosa kept perpetually ready for the occasional visitor or ranch hand who needed a place to stay. He stepped back, suddenly aware of how improper it was for him to be alone with an unconscious woman in a bedroom, even under these circumstances. Rosa seemed to read his thoughts. "Go tend to your horse and get yourself warm," she ordered. "I will care for her. She needs dry clothes and warming, but slowly, not too fast or it will harm her." Owen nodded, grateful for Rosa's practical knowledge. He had seen men die from being warmed too quickly after severe cold exposure, their hearts unable to handle the sudden change. He took one last look at the mysterious woman, her face peaceful despite her injuries, and felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. Something about her called to him, some quality he could not name but felt in his bones. He forced himself to leave the room and tend to his duties. His mare needed rubbing down and feeding after their ordeal, and Rosa was right that he needed to warm himself as well. But as he worked in the barn, brushing snow from his horse's coat and measuring out oats, his mind kept returning to the woman in his spare room. Who was she? What story lay behind those bruises and that desperate situation? And why did he feel such a fierce protectiveness towards someone whose name he did not even know? The blizzard continued to rage outside, wind howling around the barn like a living thing. Owen finished with his horse and checked on the rest of his small herd of cattle, making sure they had access to the shelter of the windbreak he had constructed last winter. Satisfied that his animals would survive the storm, he trudged back through knee-deep snow to the house, his mind already racing ahead to the questions he would ask once the woman regained consciousness. Inside, the warmth hit him like a physical force, making his frozen fingers and toes begin the painful process of thawing. He hung his coat by the door and moved toward the spare room, but Rosa emerged and shook her head. "She sleeps," the older woman said quietly. "Her body temperature is rising slowly. I cleaned her wounds and dressed her in one of my nightgowns. The bruises on her arms are several days old, the cut on her head perhaps 2 days. Someone hurt her, Owen. This was not an accident." Owen's jaw tightened. "When she wakes, we will learn what happened. Until then, we keep her safe and warm." "You did a good thing bringing her here," Rosa said, patting his arm. Now go change into dry clothes before you catch your death. I will watch over her." Owen did as he was told, changing into wool pants and a fresh shirt in his own room before returning to the kitchen where Rosa had left a pot of beef stew warming on the stove. He ate mechanically, tasting nothing, his ears straining for any sound from the spare room that might indicate the woman was waking. The storm outside showed no signs of abating, which meant they would all be trapped together for at least another day, possibly more. The ranch was isolated even in good weather, situated on 2,000 acres of Texas prairie that Owen had purchased with money saved from his years working cattle drives up to Kansas. He had wanted space, freedom, a place where he could build something of his own away from the crowded settlements and the expectations of others. Now that isolation meant the mysterious woman would have time to recover before any decisions needed to be made about her future. Night fell early, the storm blocking what little winter sun had tried to penetrate the clouds. Owen sat in his chair by the fireplace, pretending to read a book, but actually staring at the flames and thinking. He was 28 years old, a successful rancher who had earned respect among his neighbors for his hard work and fair dealings. He had never married, though several women in Laredo had made it clear they would welcome his attention. The truth was that Owen had been waiting for something, some feeling or connection that went beyond practical considerations of building a household. He wanted what his parents had shared before his mother's death, when he was 16, that deep partnership that made them stronger together than apart. His father had told him once that when you met the right person, you just knew. Your heart recognized something in them that spoke to your soul, and nothing else mattered after that. Owen had thought it romantic nonsense at the time, the idealism of a man grieving his lost love. But now, having held a complete stranger in his arms and felt that strange pull toward her, he wondered if perhaps his father had been right all along. "Owen," Rosa's voice broke through his reverie. "She is stirring. I think she might wake soon." He was on his feet immediately, following Rosa to the spare room. The woman lay in the bed surrounded by quilts, her dark hair dried now and spread across the pillow. In the lamplight, Owen could see that she was beautiful, with fine features and skin that would be golden when not pale from cold and injury. Her eyes were moving beneath her closed lids, and her fingers twitched against the blankets. "Should I stay?" Owen asked uncertainly. She might be frightened to wake and find a strange man in her room. "You saved her life," Rosa said firmly. "She deserves to know who brought her to safety. But stand back a bit, give her space." Owen positioned himself near the door while Rosa sat on a chair beside the bed, ready to offer a woman's comfort if needed. They waited in tense silence, watching for signs of waking. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the woman's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she stared at the ceiling with obvious confusion, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of unfamiliar surroundings. Then her gaze found Rosa, and panic flashed across her features. She tried to sit up quickly, but her body was not ready for such movement. She gasped and fell back against the pillows, one hand going to her head where the wound throbbed. "Easy, child," Rosa soothed, placing a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. "You are safe. You are in Owen O'Malley's ranch house. He found you in the snow and brought you here. You were nearly frozen to death." The woman's eyes darted around the room, landing on Owen and studying him with an intensity that made him straighten unconsciously. He saw fear in her expression, but also calculation, as though she were trying to determine if he represented a new threat or genuine safety. "You are safe here," Owen said, keeping his voice low and calm. "No one will hurt you, I give you my word." She continued to study him for a long moment, and Owen forced himself to stand still under her scrutiny, letting her see that he meant no harm. Finally, some of the tension left her shoulders, though wariness remained in her eyes. "What is your name?" Rosa asked gently. The woman's throat worked as she tried to speak. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper, rough from disuse and cold. "Violet. Violet," Rosa repeated warmly. "That is a beautiful name. I am Rosa and this is Owen O'Malley. You are on his ranch outside Laredo. Do you remember what happened to you?" Violet's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks. Her hands gripped the blankets so tightly her knuckles went white. "He tried to kill me," she whispered. "My husband. He found out I was trying to leave him, and he beat me and threw me out of the wagon in the middle of nowhere during the storm. He said I could freeze to death for all he cared." The words hit Owen like a physical blow. He had suspected violence, but hearing the confirmation, knowing that someone had deliberately left this woman to die in the blizzard, filled him with a rage so fierce he had to clench his fists to control it. What kind of monster would do such a thing? "Where is your husband now?" Owen asked, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "I do not know," Violet said, fresh tears streaming down her face. "He drove away. I tried to follow the wagon tracks, but the snow covered them and I got lost. I walked for so long and then I could not feel my feet anymore and everything started to go dark. I thought I was going to die. I wanted to die in that moment. I was so cold and so tired." Rosa made comforting sounds and reached for a cloth to wipe Violet's tears. "But you did not die. God sent Owen to find you and now you are here where you are safe. Your husband cannot hurt you anymore." "You do not understand," Violet said desperately. "Victor is not the kind of man who lets go of what he considers his property. He has money and influence. He knows people all through Texas. When he realizes I might have survived, he will come looking for me. He will find me, and when he does, he will kill me for certain this time." "Not while I have breath in my body," Owen said with such conviction that both women turned to stare at him. "I do not care who your husband is or what connections he has. You are under my protection now. He will have to go through me to get to you, and I promise you that is not going to happen." Violet searched his face, looking for signs of empty bravado or false promises. Owen met her gaze steadily, letting her see the truth in his eyes. He meant every word. Something had shifted in him the moment he found her in that snowy field, some fundamental change that meant he could not and would not abandon her to her fate. "Why would you do that?" Violet asked, her voice breaking. "You do not even know me. Why would you risk yourself for a stranger?" Owen moved closer to the bed, though he was careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Because it is the right thing to do. Because no one deserves to be treated the way your husband treated you. And because I could not live with myself if I did nothing while you were in danger." Fresh tears spilled down Violet's cheeks, but these seemed different from before, born of relief and gratitude rather than fear and despair. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my life." "Rest now," Rosa said, fussing with the blankets. "You need to regain your strength. We will talk more in the morning when you feel better. Are you hungry? I have stew." Violet nodded hesitantly. "A little, yes. I have not eaten in 2 days." Rosa stood immediately. "I will bring you some broth to start, something easy on your stomach. Owen, help me in the kitchen." Owen recognized the command for what it was, an order to give Violet some privacy and also an opportunity for Rosa to speak with him alone. He nodded to Violet. "I will be just down the hall if you need anything. You are safe here. Try to rest." In the kitchen, Rosa rounded on him the moment they were out of earshot. "This is serious, Owen. If what she says is true, if her husband is dangerous and well-connected, you could be bringing trouble to your door." "I know," Owen said quietly. "But what would you have me do? turn her out into the snow, send her back to a man who tried to murder her. I cannot do that, Rosa, I will not. Rosa sighed, but her expression softened. You have your father's heart, she said, always rushing to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I am not saying you are wrong. I am saying you need to be careful. Find out more about this husband of hers, about what you are facing, and make plans for how to keep her safe if he comes looking. I will, Owen promised. But first, she needs to heal. Both her body and her spirit have been badly hurt. She needs time and safety to recover. Rosa nodded and set about preparing a bowl of broth with some soft bread. Owen carried it to the spare room, knocking softly before entering. Violet had managed to push herself up against the pillows, though the effort clearly cost her. Her face was pinched with pain, and she held one hand against her ribs in a way that suggested more injuries beneath Rosa's borrowed nightgown. Here, Owen said, setting the tray across her lap. Start with this. Rosa is the best cook in 3 counties. Her food will help you heal. Violet picked up the spoon with trembling fingers and brought it to her lips. She sipped carefully, and Owen saw the exact moment the warm broth hit her empty stomach. Her eyes closed in something like bliss, and she took another sip, then another. He watched her eat, feeling an odd satisfaction in seeing her take nourishment. Thank you, Violet said again when she had finished half the bowl, for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not owe me anything, Owen said firmly. Just focus on getting well. Violet looked down at her hands, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. I need to tell you about Victor, about who he is. You deserve to know what you are risking by helping me. Owen pulled the chair Rosa had vacated closer to the bed and sat down. Only if you feel strong enough. It can wait until tomorrow. No, Violet said, shaking her head. You need to know. Victor Emerson owns one of the largest cattle operations in southern Texas. He has contracts with the Army and connections in the territorial government. When I married him 8 months ago, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. He was handsome and wealthy, and he said he loved me. I was working as a teacher in San Antonio, supporting myself after my parents died, and he seemed like an answer to prayer. She paused, taking a shaky breath before continuing. But after the wedding, everything changed. He became controlling, jealous, angry over the smallest things. He did not want me talking to other men, did not want me leaving the house without his permission. At first, it was just words, criticism, and insults. Then he started pushing me, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. The first time he hit me was 3 months ago. I made the mistake of disagreeing with him in front of his business associates. When they left, he backhanded me so hard I saw stars. Owen felt his anger building again but forced himself to remain quiet to let her tell her story. I knew I had to leave, Violet continued. But he controlled all the money, and he watched me constantly. I started hiding food and supplies, planning my escape. I was going to wait until he went on one of his business trips and then run. But he found my hidden bag last week. That was when the beating really started. He locked me in our bedroom for days, and when he finally let me out yesterday morning, I thought maybe he had forgiven me. Instead, he told me to get in the wagon. He drove for hours, getting farther and farther from civilization. When he finally stopped, he dragged me out of the wagon and beat me again. Then he just left me there in the snow and drove away. What is his full name? Owen asked, his voice hard. Victor Emerson, you said. Yes. He owns the Crossed E Ranch about 40 miles west of San Antonio. Everyone knows him. Everyone respects him. No one would believe me if I told them what he is really like behind closed doors. He is charming in public, generous to his friends, active in the community. I tried to tell a doctor once about the bruises, and he suggested I must have been clumsy or confused. He could not imagine Victor Emerson being violent. Owen stood and began pacing the small room, his mind racing. The name was familiar. He had heard of the Crossed E Ranch and its influential owner, though they had never met personally. Violet was right that Emerson had power and connections, but Owen was not without resources of his own. He knew the sheriff in Laredo, a good man named Tom Brennan who believed in justice. He knew other ranchers who valued integrity over influence. And he knew every inch of his own land, which gave him the advantage if Emerson came looking for trouble. "Listen to me," Owen said, stopping his pacing to face Violet directly. "You are not going back to him. I do not care how much money or power he has. You are a free woman with every right to leave a marriage that threatens your life. We will figure this out together, but you need to trust me." "Can you do that?" Violet studied his face for a long moment, and Owen found himself holding his breath, waiting for her answer. Finally, she nodded slowly. "I will try. I do not know you, but you saved my life when you could have ridden past. That means something. That means I should trust you." "Good," Owen said, feeling relieved. "Now rest. The storm is still raging, which means no one can travel. We have time to make plans and for you to heal. Rosa will take good care of you." He moved toward the door, but Violet's voice stopped him. "Owen," he turned back. "Yes." "What you said earlier about me being under your protection. Did you mean it?" "Every word," Owen said without hesitation. "You are safe here, Violet. I swear it on my life." Something in her expression shifted, a tiny crack in the wall of fear and trauma she had built around herself. It was not trust, not yet, but perhaps the first hint that trust might be possible. Owen took that small victory and carried it with him as he left the room, letting Rosa take over the nursing duties while he checked the windows and doors, making sure everything was secure against both the storm and any other threats that might materialize. The blizzard continued through the night and into the next day, piling snow against the house and barn in massive drifts that would take days to clear. Owen spent the time caring for his animals, keeping the fires burning and trying not to think too much about the woman recovering in his spare room. But it was impossible not to think about her. Violet had appeared in his life like an answered prayer he had not known he was making, vulnerable and hurting yet showing a strength that amazed him. She had survived a brutal assault and abandonment in deadly conditions, had walked through a blizzard until she collapsed, and now she was sitting up in bed eating Rosa's stew and talking about her future. Owen found himself drawn to check on her throughout the day, always with some excuse about needing to speak with Rosa or bring more firewood or adjust the curtains. Violet seemed amused by his transparent reasons for visiting, and as the day wore on, she began to smile occasionally, small expressions that transformed her face and made Owen's heart do strange things in his chest. By the second evening, Violet was strong enough to sit in a chair by the fire in the main room, wrapped in blankets with her feet propped up. The bruises on her face were fading from purple to yellowish green, and the cut on her temple was healing cleanly. She still moved carefully, protecting her injured ribs, but color had returned to her cheeks and life to her eyes. "Tell me about your ranch," Violet said as Owen settled into his usual chair across from her. "Rosa says you built it yourself." "Most of it," Owen acknowledged. "I worked cattle drives from the time I was 16 until I was 23, saving every penny I could. When I had enough, I bought this land and started building. It took 2 years to get the house and barn finished, another year to build up a decent herd. I still have a long way to go before it is what I envision, but it is mine, earned through my own labor." "That must feel good," Violet said wistfully, "to have something that belongs to you that no one can take away." "It does," Owen agreed. though I learned from my father that what matters most cannot be bought or built. He always said that land and cattle are just things. What makes a place a home is the people in it. Violet was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. Is he still living? No, he died 4 years ago. Heart gave out while he was working in his garden. He lived a good life, though, and he taught me everything I know about being a man of integrity. I try to honor his memory by living according to the principles he instilled in me. He would be proud of you, Violet said softly. Taking in a stranger in need, risking yourself for someone you do not know, that takes courage and compassion, or stubbornness, Owen said with a slight smile. Rosa says I inherited my father's stubborn streak along with his sense of duty. Violet laughed, a sound that made something warm bloom in Owen's chest. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, and he immediately wanted to hear it again. Over the following days, as the storm finally blew itself out and the sun returned to melt the massive snowdrifts, Owen and Violet fell into a comfortable routine. She grew stronger each day, graduating from broth to solid food, from sitting in a chair to walking carefully around the house. She helped Rosa with small tasks, folding laundry and peeling vegetables, clearly uncomfortable with being idle. Owen found excuses to be near her, teaching her about the ranch, showing her his horses, walking with her around the property as she regained her strength. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their pasts. Owen learned that Violet had been born Violet Elizabeth Emerson in a small town called Fredericksburg, that she had always loved books and learning, that she had become a teacher because she wanted to help children discover the joy of knowledge. She had met Victor at a community dance, had been swept off her feet by his attention and promises of a better life. The marriage had been her attempt at creating the family she had lost when her parents died within months of each other from influenza. Instead, she had found herself trapped in a nightmare. Violet learned that Owen had grown up on a small farm in East Texas, that his mother had died of pneumonia when he was 16, that he had taken to the cattle trails partly to help support his father and partly to see more of the world. He had always dreamed of owning his own ranch, of building something lasting that he could pass on to his own children someday. He loved the land, the rhythm of the seasons, the satisfaction of honest work. He had never married because he had been too busy building his dream, and because he had never met a woman who made him want to share that dream. As they talked and spent time together, Owen felt himself falling. It was a gradual process, like snow accumulating flake by flake, until suddenly you looked around and realized the world had been transformed. He fell in love with Violet's intelligence, the way she asked thoughtful questions about everything from cattle breeding to crop rotation. He fell in love with her resilience, the way she refused to let her trauma define her or break her spirit. He fell in love with her kindness, the gentle way she spoke to Rosa, and the compassion she showed for his animals. He fell in love with her smile, rare at first, but becoming more frequent as she healed and felt safe. But Owen kept his feelings to himself. Violet was recovering from terrible abuse, and the last thing she needed was another man making demands or declaring intentions. She needed time and space to heal, to figure out who she was outside the prison of her marriage. Owen could wait. He was a patient man, and Violet was worth waiting for. 2 weeks after Owen found Violet in the snow, the world had returned to its normal winter appearance. The massive snowfall had melted under bright sunny days, leaving the ground muddy but passable. Owen knew he needed to ride into Lerdo, both to report what had happened and to speak with Sheriff Brennan about Violet's situation. He was reluctant to leave her, worried that Victor Emerson might choose that moment to appear, but Rosa assured him she could handle any trouble with the shotgun she kept loaded by the kitchen door. "I will be back before nightfall," Owen promised as he prepared to leave. Violet stood on the porch, wrapped in a shawl Rosa had given her, watching him saddle his horse. "Stay close to the house and do not answer the door for anyone except me." "I will be fine," Violet said, though he could see worry in her eyes. "Be careful, Owen. If Victor has been looking for me, if he suspects I might have survived, he could have men watching for anyone asking questions." "I will be careful," Owen promised. He mounted his horse and looked down at her, struck again by how beautiful she was in the morning light. "Violet, I need to ask you something. When I speak with the sheriff, what do you want to happen? Do you want to press charges against your husband? Do you want to try to legally end your marriage?" Violet wrapped her arms around herself. "I do not know if it is possible to charge him with anything. He would just say I wandered off in the storm and got lost. As for the marriage, Texas law does not make divorce easy for women. I would need to prove adultery or cruelty, and even then, it could take years and cost money I do not have. Mostly, I just want to be free of him. I want to build a new life where he cannot find me." "We will figure it out," Owen said. "I promise." The ride to Lerdo took less than 2 hours on the muddy but passable roads. The town was a typical Texas settlement of about 2,000 people, with a main street lined with shops, saloons, and businesses, surrounded by residential areas and a few churches. Owen tied his horse outside the sheriff's office and found Tom Brennan inside, going through wanted posters. "Owen," Tom said, standing to shake hands. He was a man in his early 40s with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Did not expect to see you in town so soon after that blizzard. Everything all right at your place?" "The ranch is fine," Owen said. "But I need to talk to you about something serious, something that needs to stay between us for now." Tom's expression turned immediately professional. "Close the door and have a seat." Owen did so, then spent the next 30 minutes explaining everything. He told Tom about finding Violet in the snow, about her injuries and her story, about Victor Emerson and the attempted murder disguised as abandonment. Tom listened without interrupting, his face growing darker as the story progressed. "Victor Emerson," Tom said when Owen finished. "I know of him. Never met him personally, but he has a reputation as a successful businessman. You are saying he tried to kill his own wife." "I am saying he beat her badly enough to break her ribs, then threw her out of a wagon in the middle of a blizzard with no coat or supplies and left her to freeze to death," Owen said flatly. "If I had not found her when I did, she would be dead. There is no question about that." Tom rubbed his face wearily. "You understand what you are asking me to do here? Emerson has friends in high places. If I go after him based solely on his wife's word against his, it could cause all kinds of political trouble." "I am not asking you to go after him," Owen said carefully. "Not yet. I am asking you to be aware of the situation. Violet is terrified that he will come looking for her. If he shows up in Lerdo asking questions or making accusations, I need you to know the truth. I need you on our side." Tom studied Owen for a long moment. "You care about this woman. It is written all over your face." "She is under my protection," Owen said. "That is not what I asked." Owen met his friend's eyes steadily. "Yes, I care about her, but that does not change the facts of what happened. Victor Emerson tried to murder his wife. That is a crime regardless of how I feel about the victim." "Fair enough," Tom said. "All right, here is what I can do. I will send some inquiries to San Antonio, see what I can learn about Emerson and whether his wife has been reported missing. If she has, that tells us he is looking for her. If she has not been reported missing, that suggests he assumes she is dead and has moved on. Either way, the information will be useful. In the meantime, keep her safe on your ranch. Do not bring her to town where someone might recognize her and report back to Emerson. And be prepared for trouble if he does come calling." "I am already prepared," Owen said. "I will not let him hurt her again." "I believe you," Tom said. "Just be smart about it. Do not do anything that will get you arrested or killed." Texas law is not always on the side of the righteous, as much as I wish it were. Owen left the sheriff's office feeling both relieved and anxious. Tom was a good man who would help as much as he could within the constraints of his position. But Owen knew that ultimately, Violet's safety depended on him. He stopped by the general store to pick up supplies, including fabric so Rosa could make Violet some proper clothes, and several books he thought she might enjoy. Then he headed back to the ranch, eager to assure himself that all was well. He found Violet in the barn when he arrived, feeding carrots to his horses and talking to them in a soft voice that made the animals prick their ears forward with interest. She turned when she heard him approach, and the smile that lit her face made his heart skip a beat. "You are back," she said with obvious relief. "I was worried." "I told you I would be back before nightfall," Owen said, dismounting and leading his horse into the barn. "Did you think I would abandon you?" "No," Violet said quickly. "But I thought maybe Victor had found you in town or that something had happened. I was being foolish." "You were being cautious, which is smart given what you have been through." Owen unsaddled his horse and began rubbing the animal down. "I spoke with Sheriff Brennan. He is going to make some inquiries and let us know what he learns. In the meantime, he agrees you should stay here where it is safe." Violet moved closer, her hand resting on the stall door between them. "Owen, I have been thinking. I cannot hide here forever. Eventually, I need to make a life for myself. I need work, a way to support myself. I was thinking perhaps I could find a teaching position somewhere far from here, maybe up north or out west. Somewhere Victor would never think to look for me." The thought of Violet leaving, of her disappearing to some distant place where Owen would never see her again, hit him like a physical blow. But he forced himself to nod, to act as though it were a reasonable plan. "You could do that," he said carefully, "but you do not have to decide right now. You are welcome to stay here as long as you need. There is no rush." "You have already done so much for me," Violet said. "I do not want to impose on your hospitality forever. You have your own life to live, and I am just a complication you never asked for." Owen stopped what he was doing and looked at her directly. "Violet, you are not a complication. You are a woman who survived something terrible and who deserves a chance to heal and build the life you want. If that means staying here for a while longer, then stay. If it means helping you find a teaching position elsewhere, I will help you do that. But do not make decisions based on what you think I want or do not want. Make them based on what is best for you." Tears filled Violet's eyes. "Why are you so kind to me? I still do not understand it." "Because you deserve kindness," Owen said simply. "And because I cannot imagine my life now without you in it." The words hung in the air between them, more revealing than Owen had intended. Violet stared at him, her lips parted in surprise, and Owen cursed himself internally for speaking too soon, for putting pressure on her when she was not ready. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "That was inappropriate of me. You do not need to respond or feel obligated in any way. I just want you to know that you are valued here, that your presence is not a burden but a gift." Before Violet could respond, Rosa called from the house that supper was ready. The moment broke, and they walked back together in silence that felt charged with unspoken thoughts and feelings. Throughout the meal, Owen felt Violet watching him when she thought he was not looking, her expression thoughtful and searching. That night, unable to sleep, Owen sat by the fire long after Rosa and Violet had retired to their rooms. He stared into the flames and tried to make sense of his own feelings. He had known Violet for only 2 weeks, yet she had become central to his thoughts and plans. He wanted to protect her, yes, but it was more than that. He wanted to know everything about her. He wanted to hear her laugh and see her smile. He wanted to share his days with her, to build a future that included her presence. He wanted to kiss her, to hold her, to tell her that she was safe and loved and cherished. But Violet was still healing from terrible trauma. She was still legally married to a dangerous man. She was vulnerable and dependent on Owen's protection. Any romantic overture at this point would be taking advantage of her situation. Owen knew he needed to be patient, to give her time and space, to let any feelings develop naturally without pressure. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that felt both comfortable and bittersweet. Owen worked his ranch, repairing winter damage and preparing for spring calving. Violet grew stronger and more confident, helping Rosa with household tasks and beginning to teach Owen to read more fluently. He could read basics, enough to handle business correspondence and legal documents, but Violet's educated assistance opened new worlds to him. They spent evenings by the fire with her reading aloud from books Owen had purchased, her voice bringing stories to life in a way that transported them both to other times and places. In March, Sheriff Brennan rode out to the ranch with news. Owen met him in the yard, and one look at Tom's face told him the news was not good. Victor Emerson reported his wife missing 3 days after the blizzard, Tom said without preamble. He claimed she wandered off during the storm while they were traveling, and that, despite his best efforts to search for her, he could not locate her body. He held a memorial service 2 weeks ago and has been wearing mourning clothes around San Antonio. By all accounts, he is playing the grieving husband perfectly. So he thinks she is dead, Owen said, feeling a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that Emerson was not actively searching, anger at the man's cold-blooded performance. It appears so, Tom agreed. But Owen, there is more. Emerson has filed paperwork to have Violet declared legally dead, so he can remarry. Apparently, there is a widow from a neighboring ranch who he has been courting, and he wants to move forward without waiting years for a formal declaration of death. Given the circumstances, a judge may approve it quickly. What does that mean for Violet? Owen asked. It means that legally, she might soon be considered dead in the eyes of the state, which could actually work in her favor. If Victor thinks she is dead and the law agrees, she is free from him. She could start over with a new name in a new place, and he would never know she survived. Owen shook his head. She should not have to hide under a false name. She did nothing wrong. He is the one who committed a crime. I agree, Tom said. But proving attempted murder months after the fact, with no witnesses and Emerson's wealth and influence. It is not going to happen, Owen. You need to accept that. The best outcome here is for Violet to be declared dead so she is legally free from him, then to build a new life somewhere he will never find her. After Tom left, Owen found Violet in the garden Rosa had started near the house. She was kneeling in the dirt, planting early spring vegetables under Rosa's instruction. She looked up when Owen approached, and her smile faded when she saw his expression. What is wrong? Owen told her everything Tom had said. Violet sat back on her heels, her hands covered in dirt, processing the information. So Victor thinks I am dead, she said slowly, and he wants to remarry quickly enough that he is seeking a legal declaration. Yes. And the sheriff thinks I should use a false name and hide for the rest of my life, always looking over my shoulder in case Victor somehow discovers I am alive. That is one option, Owen said carefully, but not the only one. Violet looked up at him. What other option is there? Owen took a deep breath, knowing he was about to risk everything. You could marry me. If you are married to someone else, legally you cannot be declared dead. Your existence would be documented proof that you survived, and as my wife, you would have my name and my protection. Victor could not touch you without going through me. Violet stood slowly, brushing dirt from her borrowed dress. Owen, you cannot be serious. Marry you. We have known each other for less than 2 months. I know, Owen said. But I also know that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I wake up thinking about you. I go to sleep thinking about you. When you smile, my whole day is better. When you are sad or hurting, I feel it in my bones. Maybe it is too soon, maybe I am rushing things, but Violet, I love you. I have loved you since the moment I found you in that snow, and I will keep loving you for the rest of my life whether you marry me or not. Tears streamed down Violet's face. How can you love me? I am broken, Owen. I am damaged goods, a woman who made terrible choices and paid terrible prices. I have nothing to offer you except problems and complications. Owen stepped forward and gently cupped her face in his hands, wiping her tears with his thumbs. You are not broken. You are strong and brave and beautiful. You survived something that would have destroyed most people. You have brought joy and purpose to my life in ways I cannot even fully express. And as for having nothing to offer, you are offering me the chance to build a life with the woman I love. That is everything, Violet. That is all I want. What if I am not ready? Violet whispered. What if I am too scared, too damaged by what Victor did to me? What if I cannot be the wife you deserve? Then we take it slow, Owen said. We do not have to have a traditional marriage right away. We can marry in name to protect you legally, but we can give you all the time you need to heal and to decide what you want. I will not pressure you or make demands. I just want you safe and happy, even if that means sleeping in separate rooms for months or years. Your comfort and well-being matter more to me than anything else. Violet stared at him, searching his face for any sign of dishonesty or hidden agenda. Owen let her look, hiding nothing, opening his heart completely to her scrutiny. Finally, she said softly, "You really mean that? You would marry me and ask nothing in return except my safety and happiness?" "Yes." "Then yes," Violet said, fresh tears spilling over. "Yes, I will marry you, Owen O'Malley. Not because I need your protection, though I do. Not because I have no other options, though my options are limited. But because in these weeks of knowing you, you have shown me what a good man looks like. You have treated me with respect and kindness when I had forgotten what those things felt like. You have made me feel safe for the first time in longer than I can remember. And I think, given time, I could fall in love with you. I think maybe I am already falling, just more slowly because I am so afraid." Owen felt his heart swell with so much emotion he thought it might burst from his chest. "That is enough," he said. "That is more than enough. We will take everything one day at a time, one step at a time. No rush, no pressure. Just you and me building something good together." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, mindfully of her still healing injuries. Violet wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her face against his chest, and Owen felt her shaking with silent sobs. He held her and let her cry, understanding that these were tears of relief and release, the final breaking of the dam that had held back months of fear and pain. They were married a week later in a quiet ceremony at the ranch with only Rosa and Sheriff Brennan as witnesses. Violet wore a simple blue dress Rosa had sewn for her, and Owen wore his best suit, his hands shaking slightly as he placed a gold ring on Violet's finger. The ring had belonged to his mother, and he had carried it with him for years without really knowing why. Now he knew. He had been waiting for the right woman, the right moment, the right love. After the ceremony, they had a small celebration with Rosa's best cooking and a cake she had baked specially. Tom Brennan filed the marriage certificate in Laredo, creating an official record that Violet Elizabeth Emerson was now Violet Elizabeth O'Malley, alive and legally married to another man. It was protection in the form of paperwork. But Owen knew the real protection came from his determination to never let harm come to his wife. That night, Owen showed Violet to the room that had been his mother's, which he had spent the week cleaning and preparing. It was larger than the spare room she had been using, with windows that overlooked the garden and Rosa's best quilts on the bed. "This is your room," Owen said. "You can lock the door from the inside if it makes you feel safer. I will be just down the hall if you need anything, but I will never enter without your permission. This is your private space for as long as you need it." Violet looked around the room, then back at Owen. She stepped forward and took his hands in hers. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding what I need, for giving me time and space without making me feel inadequate or broken." "You are neither of those things," Owen said firmly. "You are my wife, and I will spend every day proving to you that you are valued and cherished." He kissed her forehead gently, chastely, and then left her to settle into her new room. As he lay in his own bed that night, Owen felt a profound sense of peace and rightness. Violet was his wife. She was safe and protected under his name and his roof. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Spring moved into summer, and the ranch flourished under Owen's hard work and careful management. His cattle thrived, his garden produced abundantly, and he felt more content than he had ever been. Violet began teaching reading lessons to the children of neighboring ranch families, holding classes in the main room of the house twice a week. She blossomed in the role, her natural warmth and patience making her beloved by her students and their families. The extra income from the teaching was modest, but helped her feel independent and useful. The relationship between Owen and Violet deepened slowly, carefully, like a flower opening in the sun. They talked endlessly about everything and nothing. They worked side by side in the garden and the barn. They read together by the fire in the evenings. They learned each other's habits and preferences, the way married couples do when they are building a life together. Owen never pushed for physical intimacy beyond the occasional brief kiss or held hand. He was waiting for Violet to indicate she was ready for more, and he would have waited forever if necessary. But as the months passed and summer heat settled over the Texas plains, Owen noticed changes in the way Violet looked at him. Her gaze lingered on his face and body. She found excuses to touch him, brushing past him in the hallway or placing her hand on his arm when they talked. She laughed more freely and smiled more often. One evening in late July, after Rosa had retired to her quarters, Violet and Owen sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was warm but not unpleasantly so, and crickets sang in the grass. "Owen," Violet said quietly, "can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret marrying me? Do you ever wish you had waited for someone who could give you a normal marriage from the start?" Owen turned to look at her in surprise. "Never. Not for a single moment. Why would you ask that?" Violet kept her eyes on the stars. "Because I see the way you look at me sometimes. Because I know you have needs and desires that I have not been able to meet. Because you deserve more than a wife who keeps you at arm's length." "Violet," Owen said gently, reaching for her hand. "Look at me, please." She turned to face him, and he could see tears glinting in her eyes. "I do not feel deprived or regretful," Owen said carefully. "Yes, I desire you. I am not going to pretend otherwise, but I knew what I was agreeing to when I proposed. I knew you needed time, and I have been happy to give it to you. The life we have built together is more than I ever imagined having. You make every day better just by being in it. That is enough for me." "But what if I am ready?" Violet whispered. What if I want more than separate rooms and careful distance? What if I want to be your wife in every sense of the word? Owen's heart began to pound, but he forced himself to move slowly to make sure Violet was certain. Are you sure? There is no rush, Violet. We can wait as long as you need. I am sure, Violet said, squeezing his hand. I have been thinking about it for weeks, trying to find the courage to tell you. I do not want to be afraid anymore, Owen. I do not want Victor to control my life even though he thinks I am dead. I want to reclaim myself, my body, my future. And I want to do that with you because I trust you. Because somewhere along the way I fell in love with you, and I want to show you that love. Owen stood and gently pulled Violet to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands and looked into her eyes, seeing certainty there along with nervousness. If at any point you want to stop, if anything makes you uncomfortable or scared, you tell me immediately. Your comfort and consent matter more than anything else. Do you understand? I understand, Violet said, and I trust you. Owen kissed her then, really kissed her for the first time, and it was like coming home. Violet melted against him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and Owen felt a surge of love so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. He picked her up carefully and carried her inside to his room, to the bed where he had spent so many nights dreaming of this moment. And he loved her with all the tenderness and passion he had been holding back, always attentive to her responses, making sure she felt safe and cherished and desired in the best possible way. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Violet cried, but these were tears of healing and release. Thank you, she whispered against Owen's chest. Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for loving me the way you do. Thank you for showing me that it can be beautiful and good when you are with the right person. You never have to thank me for loving you, Owen said, pressing a kiss to her hair. It is the easiest thing I have ever done. From that night forward, their marriage became everything Owen had hoped for and more. Violet moved into his room, and they fell asleep each night wrapped in each other's arms. They laughed and loved and worked together, building their ranch into something truly special. Rosa smiled knowingly but said nothing, simply happy to see Owen content and Violet thriving. In October, Violet realized she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and some trepidation. A child meant more ties binding them to this life and this place, which was wonderful but also meant more to protect if Victor ever came looking. Owen increased his vigilance, always keeping a rifle close and making sure everyone who visited the ranch understood that Violet was under his protection. But months passed, then a year, then two, and Victor Emerson never appeared. Tom Brennan sent occasional updates. Emerson had indeed remarried and seemed focused on his new wife and expanding business interests. He never mentioned his first wife beyond the occasional reference to his late spouse in conversation with acquaintances. To all appearances, he had accepted Violet's death and moved on. Violet gave birth to a healthy baby boy in June of 1883, and they named him Henry Thomas O'Malley after Owen's father. Owen held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face, marveling at the tiny, perfect human he and Violet had created together. Watching Violet nurse their son, seeing the fierce love in her eyes, Owen felt his heart might burst from sheer happiness. "We made this," Violet said softly, looking up at Owen with wonder. "This beautiful little person who would not exist if you had not found me in that snow." "We were meant to find each other," Owen said. "I truly believe that. Everything that happened, as terrible as parts of it were, led us both to that snowy field and to this life we have built together." Henry grew strong and healthy, and the ranch prospered. Owen hired additional hands to help manage the expanding cattle operation, and Violet continued teaching, though she reduced her hours to care for their son. They became pillars of the community, known for their generosity and integrity. People who met them saw a devoted couple deeply in love, and no one except Rosa and Tom Brennan knew the dark story that had brought them together. In 1885, Violet gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline Rose, after Owen's mother. Henry, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and appointed himself her fierce protector. The house rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing, and Owen often found himself pausing in his work to simply listen and give thanks for the life he had been given. One evening in the fall of 1886, 5 years after Owen had found Violet in the snow, they sat on the porch watching Henry chase fireflies in the yard while baby Caroline slept in Violet's arms. The air was cool and crisp with the promise of autumn, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Do you remember the day you found me?" Violet asked quietly. "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been if you had taken a different path that day or arrived an hour later?" "I think about it sometimes," Owen admitted. "I think about how close I came to losing you before I ever knew you. It terrifies me when I let myself dwell on it." "I used to have nightmares about that day," Violet said. "About the cold and the fear and thinking I was going to die alone in the snow, but I do not have those nightmares anymore. Now when I think about that day, I think about you appearing like an angel and telling me I was coming home with you. I think about how you kept your promise in every possible way. You brought me home, Owen, not just to your ranch but to myself. You gave me back my life and showed me what love is supposed to look like." Owen reached over and took her free hand, threading their fingers together. "You saved me too, you know. I did not even realize how lonely I was until you filled my life with love and purpose and joy. You and the children are everything to me. You are my whole world. And you are mine," Violet said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "My hero, my husband, my love. My home." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son play and feeling their daughter's soft breath against Violet's chest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities, as every day did on a working ranch. But tonight was perfect, a moment of peace and contentment to treasure. In the years that followed, life continued to bless the O'Malley family. The ranch grew and prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Owen became known as a fair employer and honest businessman, while Violet's school expanded to include children from all over the area. Henry and Caroline grew into bright, happy children who knew they were loved beyond measure. In 1889, Violet gave birth to another son they named Samuel, and in 1891, a daughter they named Grace completed their family. The house was always full of noise and laughter, of children's voices and running feet. Owen built an addition to accommodate their growing family, and Rosa joked that she would need to hire help to keep up with all the cooking and cleaning. Victor Emerson faded into distant memory, a shadow from a dark time that no longer had power over Violet's present. She heard through occasional gossip that he had divorced his second wife and married a third, that his business dealings were becoming increasingly questionable, that his reputation was not what it once was. Violet felt nothing but pity for whatever women were currently in his orbit, but she no longer feared him. She was protected by Owen's love, by the community they had built, by the life she had created from the ashes of her old existence. On a cold December morning in 1891, exactly 10 years after Owen had found Violet in the snow, they rode out together to the field where their story had begun. The children were safe at home with Rosa, giving Owen and Violet rare time alone together. They sat on their horses side by side, looking at the now familiar landscape dusted with fresh snow. 10 years, Violet said softly, An entire decade since the worst and best day of my life. The day we found each other, Owen agreed. The day everything changed. Do you know what I think about when I look at this field? Violet asked. I think about the woman I was then, broken and terrified and ready to give up. And I think about the woman I am now, strong and loved and surrounded by family. That woman from 10 years ago could never have imagined this life. She could never have believed she deserved this much happiness. You deserve every happiness, Owen said fiercely. You deserved it then, and you deserve it now. I am just grateful I got to be the one to share it with you. Violet turned her horse to face Owen's. You did not just share it with me. You created it for me. You built this life with your own hands, your own heart, your own unwavering faith in what we could be together. Everything good in my life comes from the choice you made to stop that day, to not ride past, to bring me home with you. You are coming home with me, Owen said, repeating the words he had spoken a decade ago. That is what I said, and I have never regretted it, not for a single moment. And I came home, Violet said, her eyes shining with tears. I came home to you, and I have been home ever since, not because of walls and a roof, but because home is wherever you are. My heart is home in yours. They urged their horses close enough to kiss, a sweet connection in the cold winter air. Then they turned and rode back to the ranch together, side by side as they had ridden through every challenge and triumph of the past 10 years. The house came into view, smoke rising from the chimney, and Owen could see the children's faces pressed against the windows watching for their parents' return. Look at that, Violet said, her voice full of wonder and contentment. Look at what we built, Owen. A family, a home, a life filled with love. That is our legacy. That is what came from you refusing to leave a dying woman in the snow. Best decision I ever made, Owen said simply. Bringing you home with me. They dismounted in the yard, and the front door flew open with children spilling out, running to greet their parents with hugs and excited chatter about what they had done while Owen and Violet were gone. Owen scooped up Caroline and Grace while Violet hugged Henry and Samuel, and together they all went inside where Rosa had hot cocoa waiting, and the fire burned warm and bright. That night, after the children were in bed and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Owen and Violet sat together in their room. Violet brushed out her long dark hair while Owen watched from the bed, still amazed after all these years that this beautiful, intelligent, strong woman was his wife. "What are you thinking about?" Violet asked, catching his gaze in the mirror. "About how lucky I am," Owen said honestly. "About how one moment, one decision, one stormy day changed the entire course of my life for the better. About how I would do it all again without hesitation." Violet set down her brush and came to sit beside him on the bed. She took his face in her hands and kissed him deeply, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into the gesture. When she pulled back, she said softly, "I love you, Owen O'Malley. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for giving me a reason to live. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." "I love you too," Owen said, pulling her close. "My Violet, my wife, my heart. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for every day I get to wake up beside you." They lay down together, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been every night for years. Outside, winter wind whistled around the house, but inside all was warm and safe. In rooms down the hall, 4 beautiful children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and protected. The ranch stretched around them, 2,000 acres of Texas soil that Owen had transformed through hard work and determination into something prosperous and enduring. But all of that, as wonderful as it was, paled in comparison to the woman in Owen's arms. Violet was his greatest treasure, his most precious blessing, the answer to prayers he had not known how to pray. Finding her in that snowy field had been the beginning of everything good in his life. Bringing her home had been the smartest, bravest, most important thing he had ever done. As Owen drifted toward sleep, Violet's steady breathing beside him and her heartbeat beneath his hand, he sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. Thank you for that blizzard. Thank you for guiding my path to that field. Thank you for giving me the courage to stop and the strength to save her. Thank you for Violet, for our children, for this life we have built together. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances, and that love can heal even the deepest wounds. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. The children grew and eventually began families of their own, though they stayed close to the ranch that had been their childhood home. Henry took over management of the cattle operation, showing the same integrity and work ethic his father had modeled. Caroline became a teacher like her mother, opening her own school in Laredo. Samuel studied law and became an advocate for those who could not afford proper legal representation. Grace married a neighboring rancher and filled her own home with children and laughter. Through it all, Owen and Violet remained the center of their family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They grew old together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. Their hair turned gray, their faces lined with decades of laughter and tears and the honest work of living. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young woman who had been given a second chance at life, and the young man who had refused to leave her to die. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1912, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house that had once seemed spacious for a young couple now overflowed with family, with more than 20 grandchildren running through the rooms and yard. Rosa, now in her 80s but still sharp as a tack, supervised the cooking with the help of daughters-in-law and granddaughters. That evening, after the feast and before the dancing began, Henry asked his parents to tell the story of how they met. The grandchildren gathered around, eager to hear the tale they had heard many times but never tired of. Owen and Violet looked at each other, sharing a smile that held 3 decades of shared history. Then Owen began to speak, his voice still strong though his body showed the effects of a lifetime of hard work. It was December of 1881, the coldest winter Texas had seen in years. A blizzard had swept down from the north, covering everything in snow and ice. I was trying to make it home to this very ranch when I saw something in a field that did not belong there. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but as I got closer, I realized it was a woman, lying unconscious in the snow, nearly frozen to death. That was Grandma. One of the younger grandchildren asked, eyes wide. That was your grandmother, Owen confirmed. She was in terrible danger, abandoned and left to die by someone who should have protected her, but I could not leave her there. So I wrapped her in my coat, put her on my horse and brought her home with me, and that simple decision changed both of our lives forever. Violet took up the story. I woke up here in this house, warm and safe for the first time in months. Your grandfather had saved my life, but more than that, he gave me a reason to want to live again. He showed me kindness when I had forgotten what kindness felt like. He gave me time to heal and never asked for anything in return. And slowly, day by day, I fell in love with him. We were married within months, Owen continued. Some people thought we were rushing, but we knew what we had found in each other. We knew we wanted to build a life together, and we did. This ranch, this family, everything you see around you came from the choice to stop that day in the snow. It came from refusing to abandon someone in need. It came from love that grew out of compassion and blossomed into something that has lasted more than 30 years. And will last forever, Violet added, taking Owen's hand. Because true love does not die. It just grows stronger and deeper with time. The grandchildren absorbed this in the way children do, understanding that they were hearing something important even if they could not fully grasp its significance. The older ones, who had heard whispers of their grandmother's difficult first marriage, understood more. They saw in their grandparents' story a testament to resilience and redemption, to the power of one person's choice to help another, to love's ability to heal and transform. As the evening wore on, and the family celebrated with music and dancing, Owen and Violet slipped away to their favorite spot on the porch. They sat in the chairs they had occupied countless evenings over the years, holding hands and watching their family through the windows. "We did well," Violet said contentedly. "Look at them, Owen. Look at what we created. 4 children who grew into good people and grandchildren who will carry our values into the future. That is immortality right there. That is our legacy." "Our legacy is love," Owen said. "Everything else flows from that. We loved each other, we loved our children, and we taught them to love their own families. That is what endures. That is what matters." "You are still my hero," Violet said, resting her head on his shoulder. "My rescuer, my husband, my everything. If I could go back to that terrified woman in the snow and tell her what was waiting for her, tell her about the man who would find her and the life they would build together, she would not believe it. It would seem too good to be true." "But it is true," Owen said, kissing the top of her head. "We are proof that beauty can come from ashes, that love can triumph over cruelty, that one moment of compassion can change everything. We are living proof." They sat together as darkness fell and stars emerged in the Texas sky, the same stars that had witnessed their journey from that snowy field to this moment of contentment and peace. Inside, their family continued to celebrate, and the sound of laughter drifted through the windows like music. Owen and Violet lived many more good years together, watching their family continue to grow and thrive. They became great-grandparents and then great-great-grandparents, the beloved matriarch and patriarch of a clan that spread across Texas and beyond. Their love story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of how one act of courage and compassion could ripple forward through time, creating waves of goodness that would never truly end. When Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by family, his last words were for Violet. "Thank you," he whispered, holding her hand. "Thank you for coming home with me. Thank you for every day." "Thank you for finding me," Violet whispered back through her tears. "Thank you for refusing to leave me in that snow. Thank you for loving me. I will carry that love with me always." Violet lived 2 more years after Owen's death, long enough to see another great-grandchild born and named Owen in his honor. When she passed away at the age of 74, she was buried beside Owen on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a stone that read, "Violet Elizabeth O'Malley, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She came home and love brought her there." The ranch continued through the generations, always in the O'Malley family, always a place of warmth and welcome and love. And every December, on the anniversary of the day Owen found Violet in the snow, the family gathered at the graves on the hill to remember and to give thanks for the love that had started their line. They told the story again, making sure the youngest members heard and understood how their family had begun with an act of compassion, with one man's refusal to abandon someone in need, with 2 broken people finding healing and wholeness in each other's arms. The story of the cowboy who found a woman alone in a snowy field and brought her home became more than just family history. It became a reminder of the power of choosing compassion over convenience, of stopping to help even when it is difficult or dangerous, of believing that love can heal and transform the deepest wounds. It became a legacy that would endure as long as there were O'Malleys to remember and honor the man and woman who had loved each other so completely and built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. And somewhere beyond the stars, Owen and Violet were together still, their love eternal, their story complete. The cowboy had found his lost woman in the snow. He had brought her home. And in doing so, he had created a love that would never die, a family that would honor their memory, and a legacy that proved once and for all that sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones where we choose to stop, to help, to love. Sometimes, the whole world changes because one person looked at another in need and said those simple, powerful words, "You are coming home with me."